Okay, perfect. Okay, everybody's gotten their snacks. You've all gotten something to drink. Not many choices over there, but you do have something to drink while you're at your seats. Good. Okay, good. So we are going to, Paige, how many are we waiting for? Okay, all right. Well, I think what we're going to do, we've got some people over here at the sign-in table, so as people arrive, they'll make sure they get materials. But I want to be respectful of your time. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Okay. So we're going to... Well, that's good to hear. You know, people say they can't, so I'm glad to know that. And we've got people over here that have a microphone. Okay, good. So we're going to make sure that everybody can hear everybody, right? Yeah, good. Okay, great. Well, let's do this. Let's go ahead and get ourselves going here so that we can get into our presentation. Aging on your own terms, creating a plan for your future. This is going to be a great topic today. We've got 3 experts here that are going to be discussing the things that we all talk about casually with friends. Have I updated my medical power of attorney? Is my paperwork in place? How's the stock market going? What happens if I want to stay in my home? All these things that we talk about, and I hear about a lot of times when I'm doing a consultation with someone or I'm doing a presentation at a retirement community, for example. But we thought it would be a great idea to gather some experts here to actually have them share some of the comments and questions of things that you might be thinking about or have concerns about. So I wanted to make sure that everybody has a pen, right? In your handout that Paige gave you when you checked in, the very back page of that handout has a place for you to take notes. I know there's going to be some things that you want to jot down. In addition to that, I also want you to know that because we're in an environment where we're doing a seminar on several topics, we're not really doing a deep dive into anything. We have workshops that will be coming behind these topics. But if there's something that you feel like, well, that's important to me, my family and I are discussing those things right now, I really need more details, I will let you know that whoever that I have up here sitting at this table, if you'll make a note on your feedback form that you'd like to be able to have some extra time to have a conversation with them about your specific topic, I know that they'll be happy to reach out to you and do that. So I want to make sure that you know that as well. But to get started here, let's go ahead with a couple of things. How many new people do we have today that have never been to a seminar? Oh, okay. 2, okay, just a couple people. So what I want to let you know are a couple of things. Number 1, we always plan time in our seminars for questions, always. That's super important to anybody, even if I'm sitting in your seat. I might have things I want to ask about our topics. But we try to keep everything moving, because what I've learned over the years as a presenter is that typically you may have a hot topic for you right this minute, and what you find out is that 2 slides later it's answered. So what I'll ask you to do again is just make sure and make notes. The other thing that's going to be important is that you silence your phone. And here's something interesting for me. Paige and I were down to just the 2 of us today pulling this together, and then Troy came to help us, and Michael and Paige came to help us. And in a rush to hurry up and get in here and make sure everybody had everything they needed, my phone's sitting in the car. So whoever's going to be calling me, I'll have messages to come to my car. So anyway, please silence your phones so that we don't have anybody's ringtones going off or alarms during our seminar today. And you all should have a handout that you picked up that has a ticket on it. So we will be we'll have a couple of gifts that we'll be handing out as takeaways for those of you that draw the right ticket. And then there's some things inside of that we'll be discussing today as well. Are we good? All right, great. Here he comes. She saved your seat. All right, so this is our team, and most of you know us. I'm Ingrid Sullivan, for those of you that don't know us. I'm the team lead for the Sullivan & Sullivan real estate team, and the senior downsizing experts, I'm the project manager for that as well. The other individuals that are on our team, Paige is here, and this is kind of a fun day for her because in the past she's been a helper. She's always a helper. But she has actually been the person at the sign-in table. So for her, it's nice to be able to see you, meet you, greet you, and recognize your face for going forward to future things that we're doing. So she's been a great addition to our team, and I've really enjoyed working with her. And then Debbie, and I will just say, without getting too personal about it, for those of you that are prayerful, Debbie, has been, now here I am, Debbie, who has been my right arm for over 10 years, her mother is with hospice today. And it's been hard on her because, you know, the time is coming really fast for her. And it's been hard on us because she's such an important part of our team. So keep her in your mind, and that her family is able to have some peace and comfort over the next few days. I appreciate that. Okay, this is our business model. These are the things that we do every day. What we do mainly is Paige and I and my husband John are real estate agents. And we actually learned about a lot of the things that we're discussing with you today over different experiences that we have meeting with people one-on-one, talking about their game plan or future plan. And what we've learned in our business is that a lot of our clientele, we work with first-time home buyers. We work with sellers that are in their home now, but they need something bigger, so they're looking for a bigger house. But the majority, by choice, of our clientele are 55 and older. And so at the time when those individuals are planning on making a change, whether it means retrofitting their house so that they can live in it for the rest of their life, changing out the floors, changing out the bathrooms, those kinds of things, we learned that we needed to have partners with us that could help facilitate those services. But not just partners that we've vetted and that we have used ourselves. So we have handyman contractors, we've got estate liquidators that work closely with us, a couple of different types, online as well as the traditional. We have movers and packers that work with us. One of our education partners is Elevate Moving. They're not able to be there. She's got a sick child at home today, but they're a new partner to us. They help facilitate packing and moving, and they move across state lines as well, which is nice when people need to send something or move to another state. We have a lot of retirement communities that we work with. Stevenson Oaks is one of the big ones that we work with right now, and they've got a lot of things going on themselves, so they're not here with us today. And then we have financial and legal experts that are always a part of our team in a lot of different areas, whether it be a real estate transaction or helping somebody get their paperwork updated, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And I tell you all that just because that's what stemmed Smart Senior Series. There's a lot of stuff that we need to learn about that, to be selfish, I'll say I wanted to learn about. And I thought, we've got all these resources that we have access to. Let's get together and game plan and look at the hot topics that are out there for us as we age and just share it back to our audience. So this is our 9th season of doing this, and we hope to continue on, and we love having you here. We're in Fort Worth every other month, and then in Arlington at a brand new place. So if you haven't been to the Arlington, come to us next month. I'll talk about that later and see our new digs.
Hello, I'm Troy Miller, Knight Miller Financial Group, and our website is KMFG, so we go by the acronym. And obviously we'll be speaking more here in a minute, but I'm a wealth advisor, financial planner, advisor, and help many people with their goals and needs. And we've been a sponsor several years now, and really happy and glad that we're able to do that year after year. But thank you, Ingrid, for doing this. This is a great service.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael. I'm with the Clifton Law Firm. We're an elder law firm here in Fort Worth and in Plano, and we specialize in essentially any services that folks that are over 65 need, and then additionally helping people to find ways to afford the care that they need as they age.
And I'm Paige Wolk, and I am with Alex Helms, and she'd let you know about Overture Home Care.
That's the importance of the feedback form. All right, well, let's get to getting here. So here's some important news that we wanted to start our seminar off with. As you can see, is the lighting okay for you? Can you all see okay? All right. So in 2024, AARP Home and Community Preference Survey reveals that the majority of Americans aged 50 and older want to remain in their current homes. There's a thought about that. There's conversations going on. There's things that are happening outside that how can you retrofit your home to live there? As a matter of fact, that's 75% of older Americans, 50 and older, and communities, so that would be like Stevenson Oaks, active 55s, independent living communities, 73% there for as long as possible. So the things that we're going to talk about today, legal, money, what can I do, where should I start, those things are all going to play into this. This desire is even stronger among adults age 65. Where's that 65-year-old? 65 years old and older, as well as all of those living in small towns and rural areas. Now, thank you to Paige because she brought this to us. That's good information for us as an intro to our seminar today. I think what we've done here is we've actually gotten started and we talked with our guests, but I have some questions for them. Let me back up one here. So what I have here in my notes, you know, there's a term, estate. And that word has meaning in a lot of different ways. In my world, it's real estate. It's an asset that you're living in, or maybe investment properties that you have. I met with a gentleman yesterday that owns his house and he rents the 3 around him. That's his estate. Those are his assets. There's an estate sale, a way to liquidate versus having a garage sale. That's another term for estate. But then we also get to a place where we're talking about estate when it comes to an attorney. And Michael, I wanted you just to briefly share that with us.
Sure. If any of you come from like the business side of things, estate is the stand-in word historically that's been used to just talk about what are your assets and what are your liabilities, which is another way of saying that is what's the pluses for the money you can spend or the things you have that are worth something, and then what is it that you owe. So big picture, just think of the word estate as my stuff, whether it's coin collections or it's cars or it's property.
That's good. I like that. Simple's good. Troy, before we get into your part, because Troy's going to have a chance to answer some questions as well. Troy, you're a wealth manager. I see different credentials for people providing financial advice, especially for seniors. Are they all the same?
Well, the short answer is no. Is this on? Yeah, it's on. So I'd like to put financial professionals that help people with their finances into kind of 3 categories. And so one of those I would say is probably like a life or annuity insurance agent, right? And then you may have what they call a registered rep of a firm. It could be Charles Schwab, Fidelity, it could be Edward Jones. And it's kind of a dying breed in the sense that it's very focused on transactions, right? They make a commission or they make some type of, nothing happens until the transaction closes, right? Then I'd also say there's more like a fee-only advisor. You're starting to see CFP a lot, Certified Financial Planner. You're seeing a lot of people focus on the fee-only side, but a lot of those fee-only planners can charge pretty substantial fees just for a plan. And then they also charge you fees for the asset management of those assets. And then there's another category, which I'm part of that, which is more of like what I call a hybrid financial advisor or wealth advisor. You're not going to hear the common person or people out in the public say hybrid, right? But what I mean by that is we're able to do those asset management, those planning things that I just talked about with the fee-only advisor, but we can also offer you things with more peace of mind when it comes to like a guarantee, right? So we can offer some of those insurance type products that give you peace of mind and guarantees that you know what you have coming in every month, kind of like Social Security, right? predictability.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that does help. So I have just one more question for you while you have the microphone in your hand.
Sure.
Why did you choose the role that you're in?
Great question. I guess I should back up just for a quick second. So if you have a CFP or fee-only advice, so you don't have to have a CFP to do that type of business. I have my Series 65, which is the state law exam and what have you, that allows you to charge fee for advice, right? Fee for planning and advice and that kind of thing. Why did I go in the role I'm in? It's a great question. Before I ever got on this side of the business, I've always been in investments. I have a finance degree. I used to work for the companies that like build the mutual fund, that build the cookie, right? That build the mousetrap, so to speak. And you got to see some of them do very well, and you got to see some blow up. And so I first of all, I have that experience to kind of look at that and kind of see what you want to avoid. And so that kind of helped. When I got out of that, that helped transition into more of a personal role because my dad's always been interested in investments. He's a software engineer, and I've always been excited about making money ever since college. My finance professors would show us how to do arbitrage on bonds, on stocks. Anyway, we can go on and on. But at the end of the day, I like helping people make money. Does it always work? No. Sometimes you have a setback like today, right? But what you can do is keep them from making silly decisions, right? And knee-jerk reactions that a lot of times usually cause you more money in the long term. Does that help?
Yeah, that does help. Pass that on to Paige. Paige, I took a little bit of your sparkle away by reading that first slide, which was actually one that you shared with us. But, as we're kind of priming our audience here for who are you, I've known you for a long time in home care. We're going to get into the differences between one or the other, but what is it about home care that really sparks for you?
I am a social worker by background, so I went to school to work with older adults. I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. I was the kid that was always hanging out with the grandparents and the great-grandparents instead of with all the kids in the family. So always knew that's what I wanted to do, and home care is like the slide that Ingrid talked about. I want to help older adults stay at home, which is where the majority of people what they want to do is age in place, and so that's why I chose home care.
Great. Hang on to that microphone.
Okay.
So our next slide is, what are the biggest fears people have about aging? So while we're talking about home care, let's go ahead and insert that part for you, since you have the mic.
So I can't think of just one, so I'm going to share a couple. One is Alzheimer's and dementia, or dementia as a whole, is terrifying to people. If I get that, what am I going to do? Or if my loved one gets it? And so that's a big one. And then I promised my loved one that they could not move into a nursing home, or they wouldn't have to. That's a lot of them. I made this promise, and now I'm fearful that I'm not going to be able to keep that promise. So I think those two are the biggest ones, and then they're going to talk about the financial aspects, but it is expensive to age in place, and it can be unless you prepared for that. And so the financial fear is one as well.
Pass that on to Michael. Same kind of thing for you, Michael. What are the biggest fears when somebody comes and sets an appointment with you, whether it's a family or a couple or individual? What's their biggest fear about aging?
Yeah, so I'll cheat and say that it's one coin with two separate sides, and it really is the same thing. For us, what we really see is the biggest fear is about lack of control, and so whether that's I can't control and do what I want to do because I'm running out of money, or will I run out of money, which is definitely one of the big fears. And the other side of that coin is connected to dementia and Alzheimer's, that I'm not able to make the decisions that I want to make. I want to be able to decide what happens. My grandfather's in Ohio. He's 98 years old, from a very small town, but he wants to keep on driving, and you can only hit so many mailboxes in a town of 100 people. And so that is what I would say is probably a second fear as well, is that the autonomy to make your own decisions because you've run out of money or because you're just not able to do what you want to do.
Yeah. Troy, do you have anything to add to that that's different?
Just a little bit. Fidelity did a big survey a few years back, and running out of money was the number one fear. that a lot of folks had as they're aging, but that's actually changed more to a lifestyle. It's like it's more fear of having to change my lifestyle, going and living on, $8,000 a month and going down to $2,000 a month on Social Security if there's no other assets. So I would say that's the number one, and then followed by running out of money. And then I put here the next would be, and then they're worried about the nursing home taking their house, or they're worried about like losing control or their money going to the government when they pass.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of sum that all up, in all three cases, what I see is, am I going to outlive my money? And there's so many things that have changed over the last couple of years. I mean, we're looking at it now. Prices go up, prices go down. I've got a little bit that I'm working with. Is that going to work out for me? It seems that, running out of money is a real fear for a lot of people. So what are the different types of power of attorney? And I will say, from my point of view in my business as a real estate agent, that's something that I'm always looking for, especially when I'm working with older adults. Because if there's a real estate transaction involved, we want to know who are my people. If something happens to you during the transaction, who is going to be my person? And does that person have a power of attorney that'll be able to help you and I complete the transaction that we planned on? That's one of the things that's really big for me. And I know also, because of the relationships that I have with retirement communities, that's also a big thing to them. Do you have a power of attorney? And is it updated? And who are your people? So Michael, talk more about that.
Sure. Big categories, there's really two that you need to know for power of attorneys. And the first one is medical. And a medical power of attorney is you stating who you want an agent to be on your behalf to make medical decisions. And one of the reasons that they're separated between medical and financial is because, groups like Reliant or Overture, you'll probably do medical power of attorney as well. Your doctors are going to want to see that document and know, if you can't make a decision for yourself on the medical side, who do you elect to make that decision for you? The financial side is a little bit different. It becomes a little more complicated because with the financial power of attorney, you're giving somebody the ability to access any of your financial accounts. And so that side of the world is going to come more from like your financial guys, because the medical side of things, they don't want you to sign a paper in a hospital that is also giving that power of attorney to go get into your bank accounts. So usually they're going to separate them so you know for sure what you're signing. This one does medical, this one does financial.
Right.
That being said, they're both really important to have in place. And the federal government, or the state government at least, does a pretty good job of this. If you just go to Google and type in statutory medical power of attorney or statutory financial power of attorney, as long as you feel comfortable reading and making the decision that's there, this is a free thing that the government puts together. You don't, unless, my grandfather would use language that I can't use, but in public. But my grandmother would say, unless your family is a hot mess and you've got some complications, most families can just use the statutory documents, and it's for free going to get you what you want. And if there's complications, you probably want to talk to a professional. But the power of attorney that your bank has, the power of attorney that your financial, your IRA, whatever company is handling that, they'll have those documents that will get you really far down the road for no cost at all.
Well, and I would say, while you're passing that on to Troy, in addition to that, the power of attorney that I'm looking for is a durable power of attorney. So keep that in mind. That's also important. So the medical power of attorney, the durable power of attorney, is the one that's going to help you sell your home or an asset.
So to that point, in our world, pretty much every financial power of attorney and medical power of attorney is going to be durable. You can create them that aren't durable, but you would almost have to go try to find them if that's the case. But yes, if you are over 65, a durable power of attorney is for sure what you're wanting. And if you found one that's not durable, let me know how you did it, because they're hard to find these days.
Actually, hang on to that, because Troy, I'm going to get to you in a little bit on that. So here's another question. How can I make sure my financial wishes are carried out? That's an important thing. And I'm going to go ahead and point that out to you, Michael.
So I would say that the first step is just knowing what your final wishes are. A lot of folks just haven't really thought about it. And so being considered and thinking about those, what you want to have happen, what you want your life to look like, and then also what you want to have happen after you pass, that's step number one. Step number two is communicating that and communicating it consistently to your family members. A lot of times final wishes aren't executed because one thing is being told to daughter number one and something else is told to daughter number two because you just don't want to deal with it, right? So communicating consistently is important. One of the ways you do that you communicate those things, is through a power of attorney or a medical power of attorney or advance directive that we'll talk about later.
So I had an example I was sharing with Paige yesterday. My first opportunity, one of my clients, I had helped her sell her home. She moved to a retirement community. We went to church together. She had COPD. And one day as I was walking into the service, she grabbed me and said, "Ingrid, I'd like to ask you if anything were to happen to me, would you help manage my affairs?" And of course, I've never done that before. And out of respect for Iris, I said, "Iris, you know I would do anything for you." Well, 6 months later, guess what I was doing? We had come to that place. And what was really difficult for her, and for me as well, is that she had a son who was an attorney in another state, and he pretty much said, "I really don't want anything to do with anything she has. I don't want to deal with anything she has. You deal with it." Which was, again, it felt like a lot of responsibility for me, in addition to all the people at the church saying, "Do this, and she wants that, and you want to do this." And I'm trying to do right by her because that was a request that she had made of me. We had two different wills. We had one that was a will that had dispersed things to her grandchildren and to her son, and also stated that she was to be buried in the family plot. And then we had another one that said she was to be cremated. And I'm trying to figure out what's happening here with her. So she had called me over one morning early and said, "I need you to go into the closet, and there's in this box in the closet, there's a green folder. I want you to get the folder out." And it was for Greenwood Funeral Home. And she said, "Take that over there. Everything that you're going to need to know, they can talk to you about." So I went, and they said, "No, there's nothing really for you to do here other than pick the flowers that she wants for the memorial. Everything's paid for." Well, that made me feel good that we didn't have to work with that. But for me, it was, I didn't have a power of attorney. I had a son that said, "I don't want to deal with any of that." And I had a friend that said, "I need you to go to Cleburne, and I need you to get a name placard in this color granite to say these things on for me when they take me there." I did exactly what she asked me to do. And after the funeral, her son called and said, who didn't come to the funeral, called and said, "Who came up with that, and who told you to do that?" So it was something that I was honoring her, but it was a difficult situation because I really didn't have any legal to follow her wishes other than her asking me to do that. So paying attention to where things are and what's current, and well, was she really supposed to be cremated or buried? It worked out that she was buried because that's what she wanted.
Wow.
Okay, how to make sure my documents are valid in Texas. That's something, so as we were talking about that on the phone the other day, there's a lot of different ways to do that. We need to know that, we all know that Texas is very unique and special, right? And not every place has the kind of things that we do, correct?
Yeah, we're the biggest and the best, I think is this. How does the song go? So I think when it comes to whether documents are valid, each document is going to be a little different. Wills are unique and special, especially in the state of Texas. But the main part of it is that you're going to want to sign a document in front of a notary. That is the main thing that makes it kind of validated, right? At that point, the responsibility of did you really sign this and when is now on the notary, and the notary has the little book that you sign afterwards, and they kind of have to maintain that record. Wills are a little different. On the will, there's witnesses, and there's probably still going to be a notary involved, but you'll want to have 2 witnesses that are basically over 18 and are competent to say, yes, you are the one who signed that. That is the big piece on what makes them valid. The legal components that are there, if you're using a statutory power of attorney, again, these are the free ones you can get off of the internet that the government puts together, they are built and designed specifically for the state of Texas. That is the place that I would start to be sure that what you're dealing with is valid.
Well, that's an interesting comment that you make. Just kind of depending upon who you talk to, because some people will say don't download anything off the internet, that you need to have an appointment with me first before you do that.
So it depends on the family situation. Again, complicated family situations, or how many zeros you have at the end of your bank account, right? If you're going to multiple fingers and toes to count your assets, you probably want to spend a little bit of money to talk to an attorney. But my parents, for example, my parents have statutory powers of attorney because they're perfectly functional for what my parents need. It's very, very simple and straightforward. So you don't want to just, and I thank you for that clarification, because I should have clarified this. You don't want to just download any random document off of the internet. What you want to go to is a state website. So if you type in state of Texas statutory power of attorney, that was created by the government and approved because they have some interest in making almost like a template that you follow. It's not perfect. I would guess that about 20% of you in the room, it's not going to work for you, at least at some point in your life. But as a place to start, it is much, much better than having nothing at all.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. So when it comes to those documents, though, once it's made, one and done, it's good forever, or does it need to be updated? Or what if that changes and you want somebody else instead of the people that were on there? How do you update these to make sure they're current? Because I know for us in our business, the title company wants to make darn sure it's current.
That's true. So the most important piece is just to review the document. The general counsel is every 3 years you should be looking at your documents. Mm-hmm. Do you need to make a change? Maybe, but by looking at it and reviewing it, you're probably going to oh, I thought it said this, or I thought it said that. So by reviewing it, you just are going to know whether it needs to be changed. The general rule is if there's been a significant life change, that's when you would look to maybe I need a new document, or maybe I need an addendum to what I already had. Mm-hmm. So major life changes would be if one of the beneficiaries of one of your documents, if they passed away, that might be a good opportunity or a good time to make a change, especially if you can't stand their spouse, and you don't want things to go to the in-law or to the son-in-law. But reviewing it is the thing that is really the gateway, the thing that's the most important. You'll remember that something's in that document that you didn't think was there, and then you'll know whether or not you need to make that change or not. Big picture, documents stay legal unless there is something really drastic that happens. So we'll get calls at our office. My will is 10 years old. Do I need to change it? Not just because. So especially if you are at a place where where you've thought through and you've planned things out, you might not want to change it because you really thought something through and you put a lot of time into it. You've made your decision and you want to go back and review it, but you might not want to start back over at zero.
Well, isn't it important as well, if you make a change on it, that it needs to be filed with the state?
It's going to depend on what kind of document, but if the document was originally filed. So in Texas, a lot of us are very picky about, we don't want our documents to be public. And there's a good thing about privacy and there's a downside of privacy. Our counsel is usually, it depends on your or your family situation. If they're, what we would say is litigious, if there's something that is going to be fighting, there might be lawsuits, makes a lot of sense to file those documents publicly, because now anybody can go pull that up in that public record. If it's not a fighting situation, maybe you don't want to make that document public, and that really is a personal choice. But the general rule is, if you have filed a document with the county and you make a change to it, you want to file the addendum or the change as well.
Right. We just had a real estate transaction. I actually thought about it after I talked to you, that there was a change that was made, but it was not filed with the county. And when it came time for the title company to go through the documents the way that they were supposed to, the most current version was not there. They had to use what was filed at the time. So it's also kind of like your HIPAA. You want to update that every 3 years. So I would say if there's any updating, you might choose to update these documents at the same time. Would you agree?
It's definitely worth looking at. Whether it's making the change, updating it. HIPAA is one that's a little bit unique because it's the document that you sign every time you go to the doctor's office and you think, I've been at this doctor 15 times and I filled out the same form 15 times. The reason why there's that update is as the laws change, the hospital is trying to make sure you don't sue them. And so that's where the HIPAA form is one where it makes some sense to look at because that law changes.
Yeah, well, and I would say liking it to a real estate transaction, there have been a lot of contract changes. And right now, unless people are aware of what they're looking at, they need to look at the date of the contract because it's not something that is, it may have been good last year if it was done in 2012, but now it needs to be updated to 2024 or 25. So all of those things are important just to keep it updated. Okay, so how does probate work? What's the process? So again, I'll just give you the example from my side of the fence is that if I'm working with someone that is going to be liquidating their property and there's been a loss of a loved one, we're always looking at, you know, the common assumption is, well, we didn't need to probate anything because everything goes to me. But what we find out, especially with a title company, is the title company is going to want to know how was that handled. There's a couple of different documents that we'll be discussing, and the other two will be able to get involved here in just a little bit. I didn't want you to think I was ignoring them, but probate. Talk to us about that.
So probate is the name of a court system. So here in Tarrant County, we have the probate court. So we use we turn it from a noun where it's the probate court into a verb, I need to probate a will, as a stand-in to say, I need to take this will to the court system so it has some authority behind it. The will itself, we tell clients, is just a ticket to get into the probate court. The will doesn't do anything. Nobody cares what the will says. Doesn't matter. The title companies that are here, if you say, but the will says, they're going to say, it doesn't matter to us what the will says. You got to take that up with the judge. The probate process is, and it's a little bit more formal in the state of Texas than it is in other places in the country. It's the process of getting a judge to stamp that to stamp that will and to say, I will stand behind this. This is a will that I think is valid, and there's some justice and fairity piece that comes into things. Justice and fairness that plays into it. And then the judge issues something called a letter of testamentary. Mm-hmm. And that's what banks are going to care about, and it's what the title company is going to care about. Because now, if you go to sell a house, or the executor, the manager of your will in your estate wants to split things up how it's said in the will, that letter from the judge is what gives them the authority to do it.
Yeah, which is what I had in my example. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I received the letters of testamentary so that I could actually pay for those things that she had asked me to pay for. I wasn't just wheeling with the checkbook because she said so.
And this is a really common kind of misunderstanding. The will has no power. It's that letters of testamentary that has all the power.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to probate to get.
Well, and I think it kind of depends on, at least my experience has been, it kind of depends on the county that you're in. And I'll give you an example. During COVID, to probate, oh my goodness, that was a long, drawn-out ordeal. I know that I had a couple of transactions in Grand Prairie on the Dallas side, and it took one in particular 6 months just because of COVID. I think Tarrant County is doing a lot of those things through Zoom now, aren't they?
They were. This is just a note on my resume. I was involved in one of the very first complete Zoom cases in the state of Texas. So I know a little bit more about that than most people. But yeah, you don't want to pass away in the in the county of Dallas. That's one of the big rules. This isn't just because I was born in Tarrant County. I love Tarrant County. You don't want to do it. It's really, really complicated. There are attorneys that we are friends with in Dallas County that refuse to go to Dallas County courts. They go to Collin County, they go to Denton, they come over to Tarrant. They're like, we don't work here. It's a mess. It's very complicated. It's expensive. 6 months is honestly pretty good. That was probably a good attorney that they were able to get you through in 6 months. Tarrant County, usually we're looking at probably around 3 months. It can get complicated, but on your average kind of vanilla probate in Tarrant County, you're looking at about 3 months.
Well, you and I worked on something together, and we were really hoping it was going to be less than 3 months.
I've blocked that one out. I've tried to forget.
Okay, all right. So what happens if there isn't a will? Now, let me tell them because you have yours as well. Do you have it there with you? You don't. You'll have a handout.
I'll reference this. So if you don't have a will, that process is said to that you have died intestate. And that just means literally you don't have a will. And if you don't have a will, or if you don't have a power of attorney, there are standard laws that apply. And ultimately, the judges or the courts years ago, what happens to your stuff or what happens to you as an individual is based on those laws. So this is the kind of the if-then family tree of what happens if you pass away intestate. I'll be honest with you, I still have to refer back to this form whenever we deal with it.
It's complicated.
Gets really, really complicated, and I'll probably just call up one of the community partners at the title company and say, here's the family tree, can you tell me the answer? Because if you don't do this all the time, it can get complicated. When you see this, just think, I don't want to mess with this. I don't want to pass away without a will. That's the answer to this. Just avoid this. What generally happens with intestate is the government is trying to make sure, think about like back in like, Renaissance times when you had, and people that are inheriting different things and you have, kings and princes and they're passing down all the properties and estates. That's what these laws come from. And so the biggest one that we see pretty frequently is my personal family. It's my mom, my dad, my sister, and I. There are no other kids from previous relationships. It's pretty simple. My dad passes away without a will. It's easy. Everything goes to my mom because all of my dad's children are also my mom's children. So sometimes you'll talk to a neighbor and they'll say, well, my husband passed without a will and intestate wasn't a big deal. It was pretty simple and straightforward. And for some families it is. But the one that catches people, and it's always heartbreaking, is that we had a client several years ago that owned a section of land in Kansas, which is like 600 acres. I don't know what land in Kansas is worth, but 600 acres is going to be worth a lot. Well, that land was family land. He had been married previously in the 50s and had a child. The child moved, and when there was a divorce, he basically hadn't seen the child for over 50 years. But when he passed away without a will, which means his ownership in that land did not go to his wife. It went to his previous family. Basically went to his child that he hadn't seen in 50 years.
Ooh, wow.
So intestate is not something that you want, especially if your family situation is a little complicated. The other time that this comes up a lot is if you have 3 children but you don't want to leave something to one of them, or you don't want it to be a third each child, that's the other problem that intestate brings up frequently.
Wow, okay. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Yeah. So this is the other thing that I look for. I told Michael the other day, we call that, when we're working with title, we call that the easy button. If there isn't a blended family, if it's just the two kids and everybody agrees on what everybody's going to be doing, it's the easy button. Heirship affidavit.
So an affidavit of heirship, an affidavit is just a sworn statement. You're saying something that a judge can potentially throw you in jail for if you're lying purposefully. So an affidavit of heirship is a statement that someone makes saying, these are this person's heirs. So if my dad were to pass away, I could create an affidavit of heirship stating when he was born, when he passed, how long I've known him for, and who his children are. And that's the important part. So the affidavit of heirship is just a legal document that is usually used primarily with real estate transactions when there isn't a will, or this is one of those like off-label uses. If there is a will, but we just don't want to probate it because it costs money and it's expensive, you can do an affidavit of heirship. Don't tell the title company people. They're not supposed to know. But that happens as well. When a house needs to get sold quickly and there isn't a will, or to be fair, if the will is over 4 years old, then you have to do an affidavit of heirship. And what happens is it follows this default approach. It says, this person died, here are their heirs, and then the title company knows when that home is sold, the proceeds go to whatever the government kind of
Right.
records are. So we use affidavit of heirships to avoid probate
Yeah.
pretty frequently.
Well, and we also go to the title company, and they can put one together for us, and it's the quick version.
And if the home is going to be sold soon, it's, to be honest, better to go to the title companies to get it than to us, because we have the way we do affidavit of heirships, but every title company wants their forms to be a little bit different. And so if you're about to sell the house, we'll just use the form that they want you to use rather than the one we want.
Right.
So
Right. And they have their own attorneys that can provide those documents for us.
title companies in Texas are sort of law firms in incognito, typically. In other states, they really are law firms, but I guarantee you that those title companies have have attorneys that are standing behind every single document that's written and created and everything
yeah.
else. So
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The one other comment I would make about an affidavit of heirship, it works when there's a title company behind it. So when it's real estate, it can work. Affidavit of heirships typically are going to get rejected by banks and financial institutions.
That's good to
So
write
your
that down.
IRA, they likely are not going to respect the affidavit of heirship. There's going to be another approach. You're going to have to go through probate and intestate court. If there's not beneficiaries, if there's beneficiaries set, it's not even needed. But the affidavit of heirship, sometimes families think it works for dad's house. It's also going to work for his bank account, and it does not.
Does that apply to you, Troy? Is that how you look at that?
Yes, and I think I've seen that with cars too. Like somebody selling, is that the same thing, same document?
There is.
Okay.
Different document, but same idea.
Okay,
Right.
all right. Well, Troy, while you have that, we're going to give Michael a chance to have a drink of water there and breathe for a minute. We're going to move on to another slide, and then you can volley back to him after. But we've got trust. So I know that for my husband and I, it's probably been 5 years ago now, we had all of our assets are in a trust. So that if something were to happen to us, it's the trust that someone's dealing with versus Ingrid and John. And how does that impact you as a wealth manager when there's a trust involved?
Well, good question. There's kind of two schools of thought on that. There's some that are very rigid about putting everything into the trust, right? Like, hey, get this in there, retitle this, redo that. But a lot of times there could be things that are involved later on, like a refinance or something where
Yes.
they didn't tell you about, right? Now you're having to deal with that. But a lot of times at least my experience when I've talked to these attorneys is, going through all that, sometimes they're okay with you just leaving the trust as the beneficiary. So like your IRA, you know, sometimes you roll over your 401k, right, when you retire into an IRA. Well, the trust can't own that, right? The IRA has to be standalone, but the trust can be the beneficiary of that. And so I see that a lot with like investment accounts. But a lot of times the attorney's very adamant about that being in the trust, and you can speak to that. I think it just depends on their legal opinion, I guess.
Well, I think financially, so if you're doing a home equity line of credit and your home's in the trust, you have to pull your home out of the trust in order to be able to do that because it's the home. But then I guess where my question beyond that would be, then who puts it back in the trust once that's secured?
The attorney should
Okay.
be the one that does that. So a living trust, or sometimes you hear them called family trusts, are a name that gets put on what's called a revocable trust. Revocable just means you can make changes to it really kind of whenever you need to. They're very, very popular for good reasons in other states. In our firm's opinion, they're probably overused in the state of Texas because there's some simpler ways that you can go about doing a revocable trust that for most families in Texas is better. So don't hear me say you don't need a revocable trust or a living trust. You might, but on average, most people probably there's other ways and cheaper ways to get things done. So I would say if you're thinking about getting a revocable trust, this is sort of like just the same thing with doctors. Just get a second opinion. Go talk to some other folks, some other attorneys about, is this really the best way? Or we'll talk about this more later, but the question to ask is, do I really need a trust, or can I just do a ladybird deed? Because that's easier and cheaper, and you don't have the issues that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So in general, a trust, think of it almost as like a business. It's not a business, but it's kind of like that. You know how this building is not owned by an individual. This building is owned maybe by a nonprofit, but buildings can be owned by different kinds of entities, a business or a person. A trust is in some ways its own separate entity. And now you as an individual don't own things, that trust owns it. And that's all it really is.
So bank accounts, so Paige, I was going to ask you, does that impact you at all when we're looking at how things get paid for? Because a lot of things that you do is private pay. So if the finances are part of the trust, does it impact you at all?
Only because we deal with trust officers, and a lot of times bankers and trust officers and lawyers will let us know this is the finances they have available, and they'll pay us directly instead of the person paying us
Okay,
directly.
that's good.
But we really don't get involved in any
Okay.
of that.
Okay. I know that for us, again, with a real estate transaction, if the home is in a trust, the title company is going to want to see the trust. So typically what we do, a lot of people say, oh no, I can't have them hang on to my trust. Usually what they do, and I'll say, how other agents do it is one way. The way I do it is I'll just come to you and say, I need your trust. I'm going to take it over to Jennifer, and she is going to take a look at the pages that she needs to satisfy the underwriters. She's going to make copies of those and give them back to me, and then I'll give you that back. But they want to know that everything in that trust is valid. So it's an important vehicle when it comes to a real estate transaction, if there is a trust. Yeah. Okay, let's move right along here. So what's the difference between a living will and an advance directive? Now, we're doing a lot of legal stuff. I promise we're going to be moving forward here. But let me just tell you how we craft these seminars. Oftentimes when we have guest speakers like we have here, or experts, which is what I like to think of you as, we go to them and we say, what are the top 10 questions that people ask you when they come to visit you for your services? We get those, and then we craft our presentation off of those so that they're not just things we made up and we're asking them to come up with something. So talk to us about, briefly, I know there's a lot we can do here, but just
Sure.
briefly talk about the differences.
So the short of it is that a living will is a type of advance directive. So there's lots of different directives or statements you can make ahead of time, and a living will is just one of them. attorneys like to talk about advance directive because it sounds fancy. That's probably the most honest answer. A living will also gets called a do not resuscitate order. Living will is just saying, if I have certain medical conditions or if I'm in a certain medical state, what do I want to have happen to me? So y'all might remember in Florida, this was probably 30, well, I say 20 years ago, which probably means it was 30. But Terry Schiavo in Florida, and there was a woman who was on life support, and there was a fight within the family over whether that life support should continue. That happened for some really complicated legal reasons, but the easy reason that happened is because she did not have an advance directive or a living will saying what she wanted to have happen if she was on life support or if she had Alzheimer's or very advanced Parkinson's. And so it's an extension, think of it as an extension of a kind of medical power of attorney that you're taking for your future self.
Yeah, well, and I think also when you go to see your primary care provider, they're asking you if you have an advance directive when they go in to see you. At least once a year, they're asking you that. Okay, so how can I protect and preserve my assets for my heirs if I eventually have to go into nursing care? That's really important.
So the number one answer to this is if you can afford long-term care insurance, you should look into it. That's the very first step, number one, because insurance is a product that is meant to solve this kind of problem. Long-term care insurance can pay for in-home care, it can pay for home health, I believe, private home health, and it can pay for assisted living or nursing home care. So the first answer is look into long-term care insurance. If it's something that fits into your budget, it's worth thinking about. The follow-up answer on that is, well, it's too expensive, and it can be very expensive, or it's too late, which happens pretty frequently. The way you protect your assets is going to depend on what assets you have and on your family situation. So we had a case last year that was a little unique, but the family had nearly, including their home, nearly $2 million in assets. We were able to protect 100% of the assets and 100% of the income for the spouse who still lived at home. That's really, really unique. And so it can be from that extreme to we can't really protect any of your assets. So this is a question that I would say you probably want to talk to somebody that knows what they're doing on this particular side. The best advice I can give you for how to protect or to preserve your assets is to think about this conversation even 6 months or preferably several years before you think that that's coming. So when folks call our office and what we hear from the daughter is dad is in a rehab and they're telling us he can't go back home, he has to go to skilled nursing, what can we do to protect funds for our mom still at home? There's things you can do, but there's only so much legally that we can make happen. And if that conversation had been had a year and a half earlier when dad first fell and was in rehab, there is a lot more levers that we can pull to do really kind of impressive things sometimes. So think ahead a little bit, whether it's long-term care insurance or think ahead a little bit, even if it's just talk to somebody that knows what they're doing in this field before you need it.
I have a question.
We're actually, if you wouldn't mind,
Okay.
we have time for questions. So if you'll just jot that down and we'll
Okay.
catch you on the question time. I appreciate that. You missed the intro on that.
I did.
Thank you. Okay, so why should I use a transfer on death or a ladybird deed instead of just signing over my house to my kids or my family?
So this one's a pet peeve of mine because this is a scenario where folks, I try to be clever and sneaky about things, right? But you're not supposed to say that if you work for a law firm. But like, you want to be clever, like, hi, I pulled something off that this was a smart deal. This is one that folks do frequently, and it kind of ends up coming back and biting you. And the short answer is because you'll pay more in taxes. So this is a big no-no. Don't just deed a piece of property over to a child if you think you're doing it to protect it or to hide it from Medicaid. There's no hiding anything from Medicaid. This is not a joke. We once had a client that owned a trailer, like a hitch trailer on the back of their truck from the 70s. that he just trashed it sometime in the 80s, he thought, that Medicaid found it when we went to apply for him years
Wow.
later, because it had never been titled out of his name. So what happens when you deed a house or a property over to someone else is that there's something, I know you didn't show up to have an accounting lesson, but this is the one time where, just follow me because it saves you money in taxes. Something called a stepped-up basis at death on a piece of property or an asset.
Stepped-up basis at death. Write that down.
So what that means is if you paid $20,000 or $50,000 for your home, and it is now worth $300,000, and you just deed it over to your daughter, her basis in the house stays at what your basis was, which is what you paid for it. If you had waited until you passed away to deed that property over to her, she would get a stepped up basis, which means what the government says she paid for it is the $300,000 that it's worth the day that you passed away. So that difference is when she turns around and sells that house for $300,000, if you had a ladybird deed or a transfer on death deed, she wouldn't pay any taxes at all on a capital gain tax. Whereas if the government says, well, your stepped up basis is your mom's, your basis is your mom's, they're going to think she made $250,000 on that transaction. She's going to pay a lot of money in taxes. So that's probably the main reason, is that a lot of times folks are trying to be clever, or they're trying to do something smart, and it ends up biting you. It comes back against you. The other reason not to do this, and this is the more practical reason, is because you don't control it anymore. If you sign a house over to somebody, you don't have any say as to what they do. So maybe when this happened, or when you did this, the thought was you're going to go live with them, or they're going to sell the house and use the funds for your care. But lots of things happen, right? There's, people get in very difficult financial straits on their own. There's addiction issues, or there's divorce, right? Or maybe they're trying to do their best, but they're, the son-in-law is the bad guy and is forcing her to do something different. And so you can accomplish a lot of the same things with a transfer on death deed that you're trying to accomplish by deeding it early, and you can avoid all of the problems.
That's good, thank you. So last here we have, what are the dangers of giving away your assets while you're still living?
Sorry, I jumped ahead.
You did.
This is the flip side of that same question. The big danger is you're going to need them, right? Now, if you have lots and lots of zeros after your bank accounts, maybe you do start giving some things away beforehand, and there's ways to do that as well. But for most of us, the main reason not to give your assets away while you're still living is you might need them for your care. Mm-hmm. And that's probably why you've been saving them your whole life, is to use them when you need them.
Yeah. Troy, so tell us a little bit about a gift tax.
Sure. That's actually been updated. So last year I think it was 18. In 2025 it's 19,000 per year for an individual. But if you're going to, like, say, gift a couple, then it's double that, right? What, 38,000 for this year?
So break that down. What is that?
Right. So I was just going to say the cool thing about that is, first of all, if you're going to give more than that, then the giftor is the one that would pay that tax, the gift tax, which if you look at irs.gov, it's going to be anywhere from 18 to 40% tax on whatever you're gifting. So obviously it depends on the amount. But for most people, the good news there is there's what they call a lifetime exemption on gifts, and it's a lot. I mean, I don't know. If anybody in here reaches that, let me know. But it's 13.99 million is the gift tax exemption now. Wow. So you're not really, so anything above that, 38,000, if you were to give to a couple, anything above that goes towards the lifetime exemption, which is a lot. Whenever they had I think it was 2020, whenever they had the last tax change is kind of when that was made. So, if you have anything to add to that, feel free. But that's my understanding is, it goes up against that lifetime exemption.
Yeah. Okay. This is a question that we had discussed. Actually, Michael and I discussed it yesterday. adding a family member to your financial account, what's the best way to do that? Is it your daughter, your son, that they're signers on your accounts, they're helping you pay your bills, making sure everything's taken care of on time? Are they recipients of your financial accounts? Can you break that down for us in a short version?
Sure. There's a few ways that you can add people onto your accounts, and they're all a little bit different. There's three general approaches, and the first one is called, the official name is like a joint owner with survivorship rights. What this means is that account is as much as it is yours, that other person's. So if you're married, most likely you have at least one account that you and your spouse are both on. Mm-hmm. In that account, you are joint owners. Legally, it is their money as much as it is yours. Mm-hmm. So if you add a son or a daughter onto an account with you, that is the default what most banks are going to want you to do for a checking account. That's what they know to do. It's not always the best idea, because their debts, if they have a judgment on a court or a bankruptcy or a divorce, the government sees your money as their money. Even though it's your account, they're still on it. I've given this sort of comment literally thousands of times, and then found out 2 years ago that my primary checking account that my wife and I are on has my dad on it from 1996 when I went to college, because I wasn't 18 yet and he had to sign on it. So it's worth checking it. You get the statements and you look at some things and you throw it away. It's worth looking to see what names are up there. But that is a joint owner, and there's a little bit of danger on it. The other way banks are going to push back a little bit on you, or at least you might have to get somebody that has a little more experience, is getting something, and you're going to want both of these. If you don't do the first one, you want both second and third. And the second one is a power of attorney, which we talked about, but this is a power of attorney for that bank account. And what that allows someone to do is they can write checks for you, they could they can use your debit card, they can access money in your account. But it is not legally their money, and they have what's called a fiduciary responsibility, which means they can't take that money and go to Vegas with it unless you've told them that you can, right? You can get the police involved if they do. If you do a power of attorney, you also want to put something on it called a POD, which stands for payable on death. And the reason why is if you do a POA, as long as you're living, they can pay your bills, they can access money, they can use the ATM. But as soon as the bank finds out that you've passed away, and it's usually Social Security that's going to tell them, the bank is going to freeze that account, and that power of attorney doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And if there's not a beneficiary on it, now you got to go through probate to get the money, right? You can solve that by just putting a POD on the account. And what happens there is the bank finds out you passed away, and then they just issue a check to the person that's the POD and send it to them in the mail. And it's put all the work on the bank, let them deal with it. Right. So choose which way you want to go. Some of this depends on your particular family situation, but either joint owner or both power of attorney and payable on death.
Right. Thank you. So what are the most important factors to consider when you're crafting a plan for your retirement? Troy, I'm going to throw that to you.
Sure. And you did a great job on the beneficiaries, but same thing with your IRA accounts, 401k accounts, things like that. Make sure you have a beneficiary on there or you can run into some real problems. As far as building a solid retirement plan, there's many factors that go into that, right? You may think about your family and like longevity, right? A lot of times that's one of the first questions I'll ask folks is, how long did your mom and dad live, right? A lot of times there might be some lifestyle issue or an accident or something that caused their death. But if it's longevity, they both were 95, well, you might want to be saving some money. So that's one. Income sources. So for some people, they worked at the post office or some other type of government type job and they have a great pension, right? Maybe they were in the Air Force for 20 years. So that's really nice because then you have the income sources that can help, go towards retirement. A lot of people nowadays don't, right? You just have Social Security. And then I would say expenses. So we do a big job of really trying to get into, a lot of times people ballpark their expenses and they kind of they're like, oh yeah, I forgot to have 4 streaming things, and I have this, this gym membership that's $100 a month, and they kind of forget a lot of the ancillary expenses when they go into crafting a plan, or if they're trying to do it on their own. Let's see here, and a few things. So withdrawal strategy, an income plan, that's something like a wealth advisor like myself or a firm like what we do can really help you figure out where do you pull from first? Are we pulling from the IRA or the Roth IRA? Are we pulling from our checking account or our savings accounts first when it comes to paying for things in retirement? We got taxes. You got, portfolio allocation. Are we 80% stocks, 20% bonds? Are we all in Tesla stock? What are we doing? So, what are those? What's the scenario? There's long-term care planning that a lot of times you want to go over. Lifestyle wants and goals that you may have. Maybe you want to go to this Mediterranean cruise. The first 5 years of retirement. So all those are things that go into a well-crafted plan.
Okay. So what are the most common misconceptions about planning for income in retirement?
Well, I can do this on my own. I would say a lot of it is thinking that Social Security is going to, that's all you need, right? So you don't, you go through life and you're like, well, I don't want to have beans and rice tonight, so I'm going to go splurge, right? And you're always eating out and you never save any money. And so the misconception is you're just going to live on Social Security when you retire. Mm-hmm. Well, Social Security is really, for younger folks, they may not even get that, right? It may not even be there. But obviously, the folks right now, you've heard the Doge or whatever, they're trying to do a good job of keeping that going for a long time. But at the point, I was going to say that Social Security was only designed to represent about 40 to 50% of your income. So, you're supposed to be, saving along with that. The other misconception that I see a lot really has to do with, not really planning until within 5 years of thinking they're going to retire. And so I don't want to ever say it's too late, but you may not get to live the retirement you were hoping for.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions for you. So how can someone tell if they're taking too much risk or too little risk with their investments, just looking at right now?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. It always seems like when I'm speaking at one of these events, there's a bad day in the market. But and my phone was blowing up earlier, so it'll be interesting. But for the most part, I'm a pretty lucky guy. Most people, if you educate the folks, and they really understand what's going on, then they have a little less questions, or they have trust, in you to do your job. But what's that question again? It's okay, taking too much risk. So a lot of that has to do with your stress level, right? I think we all know that a lot of stress impacts our health, and so if you're one of these people that you look at your account every day and you're up all night and you're thinking about it, and all of a sudden you got chest pain, you're probably taking too much risk in your account, right? On the flip side of that, there's a rule called the rule of 72, and I like to tell clients about this and people I come in contact with, because I came from the bank world too, and I was a bank advisor, wealth advisor that got referrals from the bank, right? Back when people used to actually go to the bank, and you'd have these people that would save every little thing and they wouldn't spend any money, and you kind of feel bad for them because they really haven't had anything, you want them to have a good life, right? And so you see them, and they're doing a really good job of putting those kernels away, but they're not getting any return. And so the rule of 72, you take 72 divided by the return. So if you're getting 1% in a bank account for most of your life, it's going to take you 72 years to double your money. It's kind of hard to, it's not fun. So, but if we're getting you a diversified portfolio that's averaging 7%, well, then obviously 10 years, you're going to be doubling your money. Your 200 is going to turn to 400. Your $500,000 is going to turn to $1 million, right? So to answer that question, it can be a little complicated, but really has to come down to educating yourself and a lot of times working with an advisor can help take that stress off of you.
And they could sit down with someone like yourself and create a plan, or you would advise them with a plan that would help them achieve their goals.
Right.
Without it being too risky.
Exactly.
Do they follow your plan? How many of your clients follow your plan?
Well, and so that's a good question. I would say early on for a lot of careers, for people what I do, they'll take any client, right? Like, oh yes, I got a client. Well, as you get a little wiser, you realize if this person's never going to listen to me, they want to do everything their way. It's probably that's why I'll try to have a couple of meetings before we decide do we want to work together? Because it may be, maybe somebody who's never happy with an 8% return, right? They want to take a lot of risk. And, if you're okay as an advisor, maybe helping with that, then maybe you're okay with that. But a lot of guys aren't. And so it's hard to ask. I would just say over time, if they're not happy with the plan, then, usually at some point, there's going to be, they might go on their merry way, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's good. If they're hiring you as an advisor, it's good for you to keep them in the loop as to where they are and what it looks like going forward.
Well, so yes, exactly. So that by having regular annual reviews for some clients, it might be a little bit more than annual. But, definitely having those check-ins and letting them know you're on the same page.
Yeah. So here's another one. How soon should somebody start working with someone like yourself? Right now.
So, right. So I would say younger the better, but typically when you're young, you're thinking, man, I got any money, man. My kids are eating all my money, But typically the younger I have this nice handy chart, right? And anybody who starts early, is going to have a lot more money later on. And then obviously, they don't even have to save towards the end of their career as much because they did such a good job early on. So I would say, and a lot of times I've talked to people and they're like, well, I went to the bank and they said there was a $250,000 minimum to work with their advisor. And, so that makes it harder on somebody that's younger, right? But, Fidelity, Schwab, they do a great job of helping people save early on, right? It's all in your face nowadays, TikTok. I mean, there's always somebody out there talking about personal financial advice. And, a lot of times those people, if they're a creator or a publisher, they don't have to be accountable. There's a legal deal that basically says they're just giving out free information, or you're paying for it if it's a newsletter, but they really don't have there's no recourse. If you're working with a real wealth advisor or financial advisor who's licensed, they have to really, whether it's fiduciary or suitability standard, there's a lot more things there. For instance, I'm FBI background check. If I just take off and go to Costa Rica, my client's money, they're probably going to find me, right? So it's a lot different versus just working with, you're following some guy on TikTok that tells you how to invest.
Okay, that's good. So what are the top three questions for you? What are the top 3 questions to ask when interviewing someone like yourself? If I'm looking to maybe make a change, what are the things that would be important to me to know about how to evaluate your services?
That's a great question. So, a lot of financial advisors, they've been trained at some of these firms, and years ago, Merrill Lynch, it was very sales based. It was very psychological, like you're going to do these certain things to trick them into a sell, right? So I'm just saying, like, all these guys are trained like that, especially if they've been in the business a long time. I don't do that. I simply just interview the client, they interview me, and we can work together or we don't. But I will tell you, because of that, you really need to cut through the noise and figure out, what the signal is, right? What the real points are. So a lot of times people are asking me how to get paid, right? Are there conflicts of interest, right? So, okay, well, I know you get paid 1% on these fees, but if I do an annuity, you're not making money on the annuity, or how does that work, right? So be free to ask them. If they're hesitant to talk about that, then maybe they're not the right guy, right? Another one is, a lot of people will ask me, "Are you a fiduciary?" Like, well, if they're charging you a fee on that account for advice or an asset management fee, then that's a fiduciary account. If you're paying a $100 commission when you buy and sell a stock, no, that's a suitability type thing. Was the client suitable at the time of the transaction? Which are 2 totally different things. I'll also say, what approach do they take to manage the assets? Many advisors just outsource that. So you're paying him 1% or whatever it is, him or her, and then you might be paying some other firm like a Fidelity or BlackRock or something at 30 basis points on top of that to basically have a cookie cutter portfolio, which is, like 80-20 stock bond. Doesn't mean you won't have great performance or any performance, but I'm just saying it's, what do you want? So with my clients, we really look at that. I'll ask them, what are the 5 companies that you really like? Where do you shop at, right? I get Chick-fil-A a lot, but unfortunately, Chick-fil-A is not a publicly traded company. But Costco, Walmart, all those things are,
Chico's.
yeah, right? And we've talked about that. So I like my clients to feel good about what they own or know what they own, that type of thing. I think the one other question, a lot of times, I think the third question I was going to ask was like track record. So it's very tough in our business because there's always that disclosure. Past performance is not indicative of future results, but what do people do? What do people buy? A lot of mutual fund. They buy this mutual fund that had this great track record, and it didn't always work out. A lot of times it does, but sometimes it doesn't. So same thing, ask them, maybe for a reference or something like that. A lot of my clients are referred from other clients, and so I think people feel comfortable when they come to us that they already know you, but feel free to ask for that.
Thanks, that's great, I appreciate that. Okay, so I think we've already talked about this, so let's go ahead and move on to Paige. I know she's been chomping at the bit, she's ready to go. So Medicare plans typically cover the costs for home health care, but what about non-medical home assistance? Tell us how that works in your business.
So that is a common misconception. Home health and home care are oftentimes interchangeable. People think that they're the same thing. Tony over here is with Reliant Home Health, and that is paid for by Medicare. She said earlier, Medicare or Medicare replacement plans. That is a skilled need. Your doctor orders it. Your insurance pays for it. Home care is different. That is either private pay, so you paying out of pocket. It's typically all home care talk. The average rate in Dallas-Fort Worth is $34 to $36 an hour. And that is either private pay, long-term care insurance, or veterans benefits. And if you are a veteran, it doesn't pay for all the care you need. It pays for a portion of it. So, yeah, it's not a benefit. It's not Social Security. It's not Medicare. It's not anything that you've paid into. It is a private pay type of a service.
I think that's important because a lot of people assume that it's different than that.
Right.
So also, what's the average cost of hiring a private caregiver? So you talked about that, the hourly rate, but I wanted to go beyond that and say, what are the things that are considered? The hourly rate, is there a certain amount of time that you have to be there? Does the location play into the cost? How are those people's needs assessed that they actually could benefit by having home care? Who's your client? Is it the rehab that's sending you that client to care for? Is it the hospital? That's a lot, but is the service required in order for them to continue with their physician? So kind of break that down for us.
All right, just home care in general. So our agency employs caregivers that we then send into the home of older adults that need a little extra help. There's no physician that says, I need you to have this many hours of care. It is your decision. You're determining how much care you have, unless it is a veteran, and then the average number of hours per week they approve through the VA system is 20 hours a week. So most home care agencies have a minimum of 4 hours at a time. So it doesn't matter how many times a week, but the caregiver, for her to come out or him to come out, it's going to be 4 hours of care at $34 an hour, say. I think it's very important to mention that there are a lot of caregivers that are individuals that are being used throughout Dallas-Fort Worth that you can hire. I see it all the time on ads. You can individually hire somebody. Why I recommend a private caregiving agency is because we do the background checks. We're insured. If your caregiver happens to have a flat tire on the way to take care of your loved one or your neighbor, we have a backup where we have 375 caregivers on staff, so we'll get another one there if one calls in. We, the overhead that we have to pay for, so you can find a caregiver for less than $34 an hour. A lot of people hire from, their neighbors or their church, or some people pay their grandchildren to do it, and whatever works for you. I'm just telling you, you don't have the benefit of the background checks, the insured, and are vetting the people that we have.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big differentiator. One of the other, you said like 20 questions, and I have very short-term memory. So
Well,
give me
okay.
another one.
Okay, so, how are their needs assessed when you
Yes.
go there?
Great question. So how it works with our agency is we do an in-person assessment on everybody before we start care. So if you determine that my husband may have some memory loss and he is unable to shower by himself any longer, and I need to get away, I am exhausted, so you call us, you say, I'm interested in finding a caregiver that's compatible for my husband, that gets along with him, so I can go to play mahjong 3 times a week. So we come out, do an assessment, and we find out, we have nurses that go out and we do an assessment of the home. We things that are very important, like, do you have pets? Do you have a cat? Do you have a dog? How are the rugs? Is the shower safe? Do you have all the tools that would make our caregiver feel like she was doing a good job in the home? So then we match a caregiver based on location and availability. And if she's allergic to cats, she's not coming to your house if you have a cat. So if she is allergic to cigarette smoke, or if she smokes, she's not coming to your house if you're on oxygen. So there's a lot of factors. Our assessment usually takes an hour, and we get very detailed on what the wishes are of the client and their family. And then our caregiver also has specifications if they've been trained in dementia. For instance, I use that example. Or if it's Parkinson's, if it is a hospice, like if there's somebody that is at end of life, we have caregivers that are trained at end of life care. They know how to go about the emotional support and all of that. So the assessment is a huge part of it, and I'm glad you asked that one.
So you have kind of, in a way, though. I remember when my mother, she lived in a different state. She had home care and home health because she was dealing with cancer. But her home care person had a checklist. These are all the different things that need to be done when I'm here. But she also did things for my mom, and maybe that's different. But my mom was by herself. She had vision issues, so she helped her with laundry. She helped her with some of the meals that she needed to get prepared, because my mom was not going to be a Meals on Wheels person no matter what, even if they were bringing steak to the door, no. So, I mean, are there differences in services that happen when somebody comes to your house?
Oh, definitely. So there's so many things that are included. I talked to someone, I did an assessment the other day, and she said, well, I need to, it can't be that early because I'll have to clean before she comes. And I'm like, no, that's why the caregiver is coming. She can help you with the laundry, with the cleaning. So good point. All of that is included. Transportation is included. We can help to and from doctor's appointments, or going to pick up a prescription from the pharmacy. So we build a care plan. So we have a list of tasks that the caregiver has to complete while she's there. But I will tell you, the caregiver wants to stay busy. They don't want to be bored. Like, they will look at the care plan and say, that's it? Like, what else can I do? So our caregivers they want to do laundry. If it's an overnight shift, they're not allowed to sleep. So if you just need somebody to make sure that your mom is taken care of overnight and she's safe, then the caregiver will be in the house. She's not allowed to sleep. It's just like she's working the night shift at the hospital. So dusting, organizing, closets, all of those things.
So I'm curious, when you say overnight, how do you monitor something like that?
Well, we love cameras in the home. We recommend it. We recommend Ring doorbell cameras. We check in with them. If they're completing the tasks that they have on their care plan, then they're not sleeping. It's called, we're licensed by the state of Texas. If you fall asleep on a shift, it's considered neglect, and we have to turn ourselves into our licensing body. So we take it very seriously.
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's important.
That's how we
It's-
monitor.
It's having a stranger come in that eventually becomes a relationship, but it's
Right.
important to know, especially private pay, what it is that you're getting for those services.
Yeah, and that's the goal, is to have the trust. Like I said, we've been in business for 10 years, and we have had our caregivers recognized in obituaries, considered best friends. I'll do it for free because I no longer consider them, this is not a relationship that I was signing up for. They're more of a friend. And so it does get to be like that, but that's not how it starts. And so you have to build that relationship just like anyone. And we always warn and say, you're having a stranger in your home. If just like any other service, if you have a housekeeper in the home or you have somebody replacing your windows, you don't leave stacks of cash and your checkbook laying on the counter. So we always say, hey, let's protect us both. Lock up your stuff. Don't leave anything, like don't make our caregiver be accused of that. So we take it very seriously. I think what is a relief to a lot of people is that we're a licensed agency, and that takes away a lot of the fears. We make mistakes, and we are able to take care of it.
One other thing I wanted to add to that just came to my memory about that. I know that you do home care, individuals' homes, but you also do home care in retirement communities, because our education partner, Stevenson Oaks, you're also in there.
Yes, we do a lot of, and somebody mentioned earlier, we do the care wherever you are, wherever you live. So we take a lot of independent living communities. We take care of a lot of people there, or help them maintain their independence by staying with them a few hours while they can do things. So independent living, assisted living, memory care, private homes, 55 plus, we're in a lot of those. And then one of the questions that you asked that now my memory is coming back is about the partners, and Brooke over here, she is with hospice. So home care is unique in that we're able to work with home health. While home health is there, home care can also be there. While hospice is there, we can also be there. A physical therapist, they come in, they do their 45 minutes of therapy, and then they leave, and our caregiver is able to say, all right, they said we had to walk 100 feet. Let's go to the mailbox. Let's walk together. I'll keep you safe. Put a gate belt on. So a lot of the care that we do is after an incident. So after a hip surgery, a planned knee replacement. So get a caregiver, help you out, help you recover safely in your own home. And then we leave and say, so good to be able to help with that. And now we're going to back away. Call us if you ever need us again. So a lot of that is we don't come in and stay for the rest of your lives. It's to help you manage a crisis situation. And I think what Ingrid and John do is such a service to you all, because it allows you to know before you need it that there's services like ours and like the hospice and home health, so that write our names down. If you don't use us, I don't even care. Just kind of like Troy was saying, and also Michael, like we want you to have the resources that you need.
Right. Even if it's just to call and find out if we're a fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's other companies out there, and just know that there is a resource. The time to call us is not after a fall while you're in the hospital and, oh my God, what are we going to do? The time to call us is, hey, let's get a relationship. This is my information. You give me yours, and then we'll be ready if anything ever does happen.
Well, I think that kind of plays into this. Besides private pay, what are some of the other ways to pay for home care and assistance? And I think what you just said, pre-planning. So you may be in the process of taking care of a loved one now because you feel like I can manage that. But there comes a time where it's really hard on caregivers. They suffer a lot through the care, that it's a good idea to just say, well, what if? If it were necessary for me to have somebody else come in and work with me on that to find out what could they do? What do I need to do everything that they offer, or what's available to me to give me a break, like you said? I have a couple of clients that their caregiver now goes on vacation with them. that's the person they want to go on vacation with because of the relationships that they develop. So Paige, I'll ask you that question, and then briefly Troy, but before I do that, Paige sent something to us in an email, and I just wanted to have raise of hands. How many of you that are here today are veterans? Paige, if you wouldn't mind just passing out some of those flyers. For those of you that are not, it's not because we don't want you to have it, but it might not be anything that you need, but they're going to be available on the table for you to pick up if you feel like I know somebody that could benefit from this. But in the meantime, as they're getting that flyer, Paige, talk about it.
So veterans do have an additional benefit, and it is, there are two types of veterans benefit. One is aid and attendance, which you can talk to Michael about. That is a financial qualification. And then the one that we have a relationship with, we have a contract with the VA that is for homemaker or home health benefits. And that's where a caregiver can be paid for from the VA to come out, and it's usually averages about 20 hours a week, and that you could get additional care if and when you need it. And even if it's for a short period of time, the doctor says, you know, you had a hip fracture, let's get you back on your feet, have a caregiver that can help with that, a private caregiver, and then we'll step away. So long-term care insurance is another one. And how many of you have long-term care insurance? Yeah, I know you've asked that before, and it's usually, so with our clients, it's 30% of our clients have a long-term care insurance policy. For a while, Bell Helicopter and Lockheed Martin used to give it as a benefit to their employees, and so we have a lot of those, which is such a great, and they had to check yes that they wanted it, and so the ones that checked yes that they wanted it got it for free, and we take care of a lot of those, which is amazing.
Wow.
Nobody does that anymore.
Right.
No company
Yeah.
will give away
That's
long-term care.
unfortunate.
But I've had a conversation with Troy about the long-term care benefits, because a lot of people say, well, if you're 50, then you're too old, or you're 60, then you can't have it anymore. And he has some ways to work around that, and other types that you could pay for caregiving if you needed it. So I'll let you go with that, Troy.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, you'd see a lot of people that would come into like a seminar like this, and it would just be an insurance agent talking about long-term care, and people would walk out buying that, right? Well, you know, a lot of the underwriters, all these companies under the healthcare costs didn't realize how crazy they were going to get. And so a lot of like Genworth, a lot of these companies, they've all exited the market, or the premiums are really high if you want to get a new policy nowadays. So you don't see, I still look at them because being a fiduciary and whatnot, even though it's on the insurance side of things, I just want to know so I can tell my client or prospective person I'm working with, hey, long-term care insurance is XYZ a month, right? But just remember, for those folks, if you never use it, it's kind of like term insurance, right? You paid it for 20 years and homeowners insurance and didn't use it, you lose it, right? Mm-hmm. So for a lot of people, we do some other planning, and a lot of times that involves more like a lifetime, more like a kind of a life insurance, but instead of the death benefit being really tailored when you pass away, it's really there for care while you're alive. So and we're actually, I don't know if it's okay to make the announcement now or later,
Sure.
But I'm actually doing two, and this is something we'll probably do more and more of, but I just happen to be doing a long-term care webinar tomorrow at 10 a.m. So I have a guy named Chris who I work well with together, and this is all he does. And so he'll be giving the presentation, and I'll be on there as well. But we'll have a long-term care webinar, and if you put that on the feedback form, we can get you the link. If you say you want more
good.
information. So on the 5th, tomorrow at 10 a.m., and then obviously for clients that can get on during the day, next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Next Tuesday at 4 p.m., we'll be doing the same webinar.
Okay, that's great.
Does that answer the question? As
Yes.
far as,
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And I think, Michael, we're running kind of short on time, so I want to pick it up a little bit. Is there anything else you wanted to add about aid and attendance?
Yeah, the only plug that I would give is that if you are a veteran or a spouse of a veteran, even if you have friends that are, and usually those categories are probably we're about 40% for our age group. you want to talk to Reliant at the back, or you want to talk to Overture about home care, this particular kind of flyer is an important one to hold on to for people that need it. It is like winning the lottery. It really is. So if you need home health, that is typically paid for by Medicare. But if you are a veteran, doesn't matter when you served, you can get your Medicare hours, plus you can get VA covering those hours.
That's great.
If you need home health, or I'm sorry, home care, the program with Overture that they work with on the VA, it is huge. It's a huge amount of money. We've had clients that we've added up what they've gotten, served 2 years during the Korean War, and they ended up with, in their 80s, like nearly $250,000, either cash in their pocket to help pay for their expenses,
Wow.
or care coming in. So if you're a veteran or a surviving spouse, write this down. It's called a 1010 EZ. And that is what
10 easy.
that's what gets you into veterans health care. They'll pay for prescriptions, they'll pay for doctor appointments. If the form is intimidating to you, call my office. We won't charge you anything to help you fill it out. It is a really, really big deal, getting connected into VA benefits now rather than when you need home care, you're a few months away from getting it. And when you need that kind of care, you need it right now, not 3 months from now.
Yeah.
So it's a really big deal. Look into it if it applies to you.
Okay, that's great. So this is the second to the last question here, and I'm going to throw that back to Paige. Paige, how do I open up a conversation with my family about creating an estate plan? I think that I've recently had contact with 2 different clients that have just, for my parents, in a lot of cases, it was whatever we have is none of your business. And we don't need to discuss that with you. We've got what we need, and when it's all done, you'll see what that is. And a lot of people still, I find, have that attitude. Or, oh, my kids don't really care. Whatever I leave for them is going to be just fine. I don't need to go over any of that. But I do think it's really important. There's been so many different changes and features and benefits that could come their way. So how do you open up that conversation?
So we ask when we meet with a client or potential client, we ask, what are your advance directives? What have you prepared in advance, like we've been talking about, to determine medically who can make choices for you when you are no longer able. We're not going to listen to anybody until you can't make that decision yourself again. And then we refer it on when it has anything to do with finances. We need to know who their financial power of attorney is, or if they have that. But more what we do on the caregiver side is we ask the questions on admission and say, you guys need to have that. You need to have somebody that you have assigned that is going to make sure that they are taking care of your finances for you if you are no longer able to. And then we refer it to one of these guys.
Okay, Michael, you're next.
Yeah, so when it comes to opening up the conversation with family, most of you are probably maybe none of you have kids that are 19 making dumb decisions. You don't know who they are yet, right? They're doing crazy stuff, staying out late at night. Y'all's children are adults, and you know if they make good decisions or not. And so the first part is just identify your trusted party. If you have one that's a family member, maybe it's not a family member and it's a neighbor or a friend, but identify that trusted party and then communicate what it is that you're wanting. That's really the starting spot. And then communicate those plans to the non-trusted parties, if there are those as well, because you don't want them to be a surprise. Mm-hmm. And if it is a surprise and you say, now forget it, it's not worth it for me to share this news to, I don't want the drama to involve everybody, let other family members know why you did that. Because the worst thing that can happen is someone expects something, they think it's gonna happen another way, they think their sibling's lying to them, but really it was just not communicated. So that's usually the advice that we give.
I did a little homework on this question because I was because it is tough. One of the hardest things that I have as a wealth advisor is what I call a generational meeting. So I'll tell the client, hey, love to really get to know your son or your daughter. Let's have dinner or bring them in the office. We'll have some coffee, sit down. It's like pulling teeth, right? They're like, well, they're very busy. They're very busy. Oh, he's in Seattle. He's going here. He's going there. And it just never happens until, and then, you're sitting there after they pass. But, and it can be a tough situation, but some of the things that I researched was watch out for the timing, right? A lot of times people try to come up with this during the holidays or during stressful times, and they don't realize the timing of that is causing that issue to probably be avoided, right? And also another thing too is kind of keep it casual and light, maybe, like I said, go out to lunch or have coffee and just say, hey, I was thinking about this, and just kind of, what do you think, right? And just kind of be casual at first, to kind of get into that conversation. And then one thing I looked at that I see a lot of people do is they'll I think we've seen this on social media a lot too. It's like, my friend asked this question, right? And you're saying, hey, a buddy of mine or my neighbor, and you kind of present the story, say, hey, this is what happened to them, and like, I want to make sure we have the best for all of us as a family. So I want to make sure all this is taken care of, and hopefully they'll participate with you to understand that. I think sometimes we all feel like, well, if I get my kids too involved with that, are they going to be, where's that going to go, right? And sometimes we've seen that. I mean, we do a special on frauds and elder abuse and stuff like that. And sometimes elder abuse is your kid, so it's sad. It can be sad.
Well, I think that just from my experience with working with individuals that I've gone on consultations with, a couple of different things. I think it's important to start the conversation early enough, not that it's crisis.
Right.
We're at the end now, and all of a sudden I forgot, oh, by the way, I wanted to let you know this. But I think it's really important to do that. And if nothing else, if it's on your mind right now and you're trying to figure out when's the best time for me to do this, create a journal, if you will, if you haven't done that already, with the different things that you want to discuss. Because when you're in that discussion, you know how you get going, you're going to forget about the important things to talk about, and make sure that they're on board with that. I will say that what I hear most often, and I would think that Michael and Troy probably hear this as well, but what I hear most often with clients that I'm working with, and there's adult children involved, usually if it's a difficult situation, and I will say they're not all difficult, but they're all challenging. I call them character building opportunities. I will always say to the son or the daughter, what are you learning from this? What is it that you're learning from this situation? And have them write those things down, because the most common response that I hear when the deal is done is, I will never do that to my kids. So that's why it's important to have that conversation, because you have experts here that are talking about how they're approaching it. But that's what you want, is you want to give your kids that opportunity to say, gosh, Mom was so great, and I miss the apple pies that she made, and the things that we did together, and how she always surprised me with things, versus I had no idea she had so much debt, or that she had all of these things, or 4 boyfriends that I didn't know. I'm joking on that. But I mean, I think it's really important that we do that for each other, so that everybody can appreciate us when we're gone as how great we were, versus, oh my God, I will never do that to my kids. So keep that in mind. Last slide here, which I would just ask the 3 of you to give a quick comment on, is what is your best piece of advice for these people that we're spending time this afternoon as they go home to reflect on?
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
You said something earlier about I didn't know she had that much debt or something like that. I recently had a client that passed away, and it was a second marriage type thing, and so the wife didn't know about this credit card or what have you, and it wasn't it was not a substantial balance, but it was it was still significant, and so that card was only in his name, and so I know a lot of people feel like they have to make that payment, right, because they were married or what have you, but her name was not on that account. So the credit card company, she called them, let him know he passed, and had the death certificate. They didn't ask for a payment. They just said, I think it was Discover. They said, thanks for letting us know this. We'll go ahead and close the account. Yeah. And I think he had a $4,000 balance. She didn't pay any of that. Yeah. So just letting you know, in case you do get a bill collector that maybe is trying to put your arm behind the back and say you owe this on this credit card, if your name wasn't tied to that credit card, my understanding, obviously you can always seek a legal opinion and advice. You're not responsible for that.
So that's your best piece of advice?
That's not my best piece of advice, but I just wanted to go off the debt thing you had
Was
brought
that your
up.
final answer?
So I just, like I said, I want to go back to that. The best piece of advice is really, it's really tough. I mean, I look, I know Warren Buffett has a quote out there or something like that. And it's like a lot of people save, and this is mainly for people that are younger, right? Or when they're building their family, like they save whatever's left at the end of the month. And really they should pay themselves first, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna put $1,000 away this month, and then I'm gonna be strategic and frugal about what I have left. And I know it's tough depending on, with inflation and everything, but I would say that's my best advice for somebody who's trying to plan and have money for the future.
Oh, well, that's what they tell us. I'm self-employed, so when I have a transaction that's closing, that's what our leaders say is pay yourself first and then take care of the rest. Yeah.
So on my side, we're elder law attorneys. Everybody that, if you're in your 60s or 70s, you're on the younger side of our clients. And so we think about topics like death and dying probably more so than most people. And what we're talking about all day this afternoon has been kind of how to set some things up when you're getting, your health is failing, or, you're at that stage of life, or you're approaching it. And so from our perspective, just don't let the cart get before the horse. You don't live to obsess about your health, and you don't live to obsess about your money. Those things serve you, you don't serve them. And so when it comes to talking about what do you want to happen to your assets when you pass away, you really want to think a little broader than that. From my opinion, is like, what do you want to be remembered for? What is it that you cared about in life? What do you want your grandkids to think about when they think about you and your life? And so, yes, your assets are worth something. You want to be sure they're protected, but there's also like a legacy and a history and memories of what you loved that you can't codify into legal documents or financial documents. And money is important. Literally, that's what we do, is things connected to that. But it is not the most important thing about you. And so as you are thinking about your life and what you want your legacy to be, spend at least some time thinking about, I want this money to go to my kids, my grandkids' college fund, but I also want them to know that, the Appalachian Mountains are beautiful and you should go visit them. If that, the things that you love and you care about, if it's hiking or biking, or if it's a certain kind of food or whatever it is, that's just as important to pass on to your family as anything else.
Good advice. I like that. I think I would just say that plan ahead and let your relationships with your family be family. You are going to take care of all of this, everything we talked about today, so that your loved ones don't have to do it for you. And so that's a beautiful gift that you can leave them, and like Michael said, live your life and leave your legacy without the last days having to be them frustrated because you didn't take care of things before you passed away. So like you said, there's youth in this room, and the people that we are caring for are oftentimes older, and so take care of it while you're young.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. So in your handout today, before we go to questions, we have a plan. So our plan is, based on where we started today, our very next seminar is in May 8th, and we're in Arlington at our new location. Cesar Bank has been kind enough to allow us to come there, and it's a beautiful classroom. So our next seminar is going to be conversations with your adult children. Imagine that, after we just talked about that. Strategies for health and healthy communication. So we're going to be doing that one in May, and then we're back here in Fort Worth in June. Smart home, safe home solutions for aging in place. So these are some other things that we've got some people around us that have tools and tips on how to make those things possible. So we'll be back here in Fort Worth. So you have this handout in your paperwork today, to be sure to take that with you. We're getting ready to go to questions, and then we'll do our drawing. And I just wanted to remind you that your feedback form, we'd like to know what you thought about today's course or seminar, but also Are there other things that you need, like an appointment with these individuals? Don't forget to stop by their table and visit with them on your way out so that you can see what you might have missed or what we didn't talk about today, even though we talked about a lot. So do you feel like you're leaving here knowing things that you didn't know before you came?
Yes.
You didn't? Well, my goodness, I don't know. Where's that wife? Do you feel like maybe you had, there's some things that you were hoping for when you came that were actually discussed? That in a way maybe at more length than you knew, or maybe you had a different understanding for it. That's our goal, is we want it to be worth your while, where you can walk away and say, wow, it was a nice afternoon. I learned something today. It was worth my time to come, especially when we could have rain, right? Yes? Okay, all right. So let's go to questions. Let's go ahead and let's take 3 questions, and here's how I'd like to set that up. We're going to go ahead and take 3 questions this afternoon, and then we'll do our drawing. But I want you to know that they're going to be around a little bit afterwards if you have something else that you want to address with them, so that you won't feel like your questions weren't answered. And if it's something that's super private that you really feel like I'd really like to just reach out to them, let us know, and we'll make sure that they know about that too. So first question.
I have a question.
Where? Okay, yes. Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Okay, when you're trying to protect your assets, and I know they're both important, the lawyer and the financial person, who do you start with first? Do you start with the lawyer, or do you start out with the
Always
financial?
start with the lawyer. They're the best ones. Interesting to see what you say. I think it's going to depend on where you're at in life and what is happening. So if it's a scenario of, this is my opinion, right? This is not a financial advisor opinion. If it's I need $20,000 out of one of my accounts to pay for a hospital bill. My son 2 months ago was in ICU at Cook's because he lacerated a kidney. And I was like, well, so much for that investment right now. Now I'm investing in him keeping 2 kidneys, not anything. So if you're looking to pay a big bill, and which account should I pull this from? Should I pull it from my checking account or my stocks and bonds, or should I pull it out of my IRA? That is a financial advisor question. If there is a question connected to VA benefits, Medicaid, there are big questions connected to government entities. That is more of what I would say is our expertise, rather than everyday expenses. My suspicion is that both of us can kind of speak to each other's world a little bit, but big picture, that would be my take.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about asset protection from, are you worried about like the nursing home taking the house, or like more of that perspective, a legal type thing, then I definitely would consult with like Clifton Law Firm or somebody like that. But if it's just like, well, I want to make sure that my kids get the money on my 401k, well, obviously I can help you with that. Hey, let's make sure we put the beneficiaries on here. Or some people don't realize that annuities bypass probate and can give you creditor protection, like if you're a business owner or something like that. They aren't, maybe subject to the lawsuit or what have you. I mean, you go on and on, but I have to be very careful too, right? Like there's certain things I can help you with on that asset protection side, but at the end of the day, maybe referring you to the attorney if it's more, you want true legal advice.
Okay. Great. Okay. Next question? Yes.
My wife and I have a trust to protect our kids, to protect their finances, whether it is my voice.
Yes, it is.
Did she tell us something?
She told me that.
My wife and I have a trust that covers surviving spouse and a third marriage. In case one of us dies and the other one remarries, what happens to all the money? Now, we're both I'm at 88, she's 88, and I'm 89. And I don't think third marriage is a big word anymore.
You never know.
That money is in a trust. And I wonder if we would even need that trust, or should we just leave it with it?
So you're going to Repeat that for the audience.
So the question was, there's an existing trust that my suspicion is something called a springing trust, and it's meant to protect assets if there's a remarriage, if there's a new marriage. And he says he's not planning on remarrying, but his wife, you know, she's not so committed yet to that. No. The question of is should we mess with it? And you know, what happens in the trust is going to get spelled out inside the trust. It can get, that kind of trust is quite sophisticated. What it's meant to happen, I have a trust very similar to that one, is if something happens to me, what happens if my wife remarries, and not allowing my wife to do something with the assets that she doesn't understand what is happening, that then prevents all of what was our assets becoming their assets rather than my children, right? And so it's usually business owners have those a lot, or if there's real estate involved, there's reasons to do that kind of trust. But generally the counsel is don't make changes to legal documents unless there's a reason to. So if there is a reason to make a change, then consider it. But if it's something that you set out and it's already put in place, it's probably there for a reason, and it's a good thing to leave it as it is, or to make a very measured and considered change, rather than what sometimes happens is people just pull stuff out, and then the new spouse ends up with the house when it sells, and that sort of, it gets very, very complicated. But yeah, I would just leave it as it is, or at least call the attorney
Well
that put it
enough
together
alone.
and get their advice on it if there's a change in your family dynamics.
Okay, last question? Yes?
Okay, my wife and I are elder orphans. We have nobody that we can get to help us as far as a person who can, be our executor, or someone who can be our secondary caregiver, or a person who can do our, if we're not able to answer and make
Like a
decisions
guardian.
for our medical care, or just all these things.
Yep.
We don't have any friends or family that we think we can call.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, who do we call?
Yeah.
So it goes with us.
So I think the question is, what should you do in that scenario as a secondary? First one is go through the list similar to what you did. In the language you use of elder orphans is a growing demographic. It's becoming much, much more common to hear that. In fact, there's a large portion of law firms that are starting to specialize in that sort of thing. Sometimes it's just geographic as well. And so the first thing is just make that list. Maybe it's not a family member or a child. Maybe it's not a family member. Maybe it's not a friend. Maybe it's a minister that you know, or somebody that you trust. So if you're at the end of that list and you just don't feel comfortable with naming anyone there, then you would still name each other in that role. What happens after that, this has a lot to do with your family dynamics, and if you've got hundreds of millions of dollars, there will be a line of people that would love to help you make those decisions. But for most of us, right, that's right. What happens, and this gets into a long conversation that is far beyond the scope of this, but when we talked about intestate, that's the will side of that. But there is another process called conservatorship and guardianship that is the probate court handles it. But if somebody has advanced Alzheimer's or is not able to make decisions for themselves, and a decision needs to be made, a judge will get involved. And so what I would recommend for what you're talking about is, while y'all are healthy, write down as much as you can in a document like a power of attorney, or like in a document like a will, because when the judge appoints a conservator or a guardian, they will try to take your wishes into account as much as they can. And so you're going to have to work harder than most people in spelling out what you want, because you don't have somebody that you necessarily can lean on, that you've told over 10 or 20 years what you want to have happen.
Okay.
And I see you're a veteran. The VA will do a lot of this work directly for you. So see me if you want some places to get some of that done for free, if you're a vet.
Carlos, you wanted to add something to
Yeah, I
that?
did want to mention something really quick. If you own real estate, one of the biggest challenges that we have when somebody passes is the lack of having a will. For the investment that you can make now, really just getting the attorney to prepare a will solves so many headaches. And it's such an easy step to do, so I can't encourage you enough to think about that. And I know the attorneys can really, it solves so many issues on the other side. So.
All right.